Here's something psychologists are just starting to understand. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you have a kind of brain flexibility that no other generation before or after you will ever have. It's not because you're special or chosen, it's because you lived through something that will never happen again in history. Let me paint a picture. It's 1989. You're riding your bike to your friend's house. No helmet, no cell phone, and your parents have no idea where you're. You knock on the door. Your friend isn't home, so you just leave. You go to the park. You wander. You figure it out. Fast forward to 2005. You're setting up your Facebook account, learning to text with a flip phone, and teaching your parents how to attach a file to an email. You didn't just see the digital revolution happen. You were right in the middle of it. Researchers now have a name for you. You're a Xennial, part of a group of people between Gen X and Millennials. And according to sociologist Dan Woodman, in studies on how generations adapt, you have something rare. You have an old school heart and a new school brain. Let me explain why that matters. When psychologists study how well people adapt, they look at something called brain flexibility. It's how well your brain can switch between ideas, perspectives, and ways of thinking. It's one of the predictors of success, resilience, and mental health. Here's the thing. Your brain developed during a time when adapting wasn't optional. It was necessary.
Think about it. You grew up in a world where if you wanted to know something, you had to go to a library, read a book, or ask someone. You learned patience. You learned research skills. You learned how to deal with not knowing. Then suddenly in your 20s or early 30s, the internet showed up. Google arrived. Smartphones became like hands. Instead of being left behind like many older generations or being born into it like younger ones, you adapted. You learned HTML, you figured out media, you navigated online banking, and you did it all while still remembering what it was like to wait a week to see your photos developed. Darsha Sherry Turkle, a psychologist at Met who studies technology and human connection, talks about this thing in her research. She describes how people who had face-to-face friendships before digital communication have a kind of psychological anchor. You know what real connection feels like because you lived it. You had conversations on landlines because there was nothing else to do. You made plans, you kept them because there was no way to text and cancel last minute. You develop trust, follow through, and the ability to read body language and tone in ways that people born later simply didn't need to. You also aren't stuck in the past like many Gen Xers who resist technology, you embraced it. You switched between school and new school, and in doing so, you built brain pathways that made your brain incredibly versatile. Let's talk about another advantage: resilience through independence. If you were a kid, you were likely part of the last generation to experience a childhood with some freedom. Your parents didn't track your every move. There were no scheduled playdates. You were told to be home when the streetlights came on, and that was it. Psychologists call this free-range childhood, and the research is clear. It builds problem-solving skills, risk assessment, creativity, and emotional regulation in ways that structured, supervised childhoods simply cannot replicate. A study in the Journal of Pediatrics found that kids who had unstructured, unsupervised play showed levels of executive function, the mental skills that include working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. You learn to negotiate with kids without adult help. You learned to entertain yourself without a screen. You skinned your knees, got back up, and didn't have a parent rushing over with hand sanitizer and a therapy session. I'm not saying that was perfect. It gave you grit. Then there's this: you grew up during a time of big changes. You graduated school or college and walked into a world that promised stability, then pulled the rug out. The dot-com bubble, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis. You watched the world change rapidly, often not in your favor. You learned to pivot. You switched careers. You went back to school. You freelanced before it was trendy. You adapted because you had to, and that adaptability became your blueprint. Here's where it gets more interesting: because you remember life before connectivity, you have a psychological skill that's becoming rare: the ability to be bored. Boredom, according to neuroscience research, is actually essential for creativity, reflection, and mental health. Dr. Sandy Mann, a psychologist at the University of Central Lancashire, found that boredom activates the brain's default mode network, the state where we daydream, make connections, and solve problems. You grew up bored. You sat in the back of a car on a road trip staring out the window. You waited in line without a phone scroll. In those moments, your mind wandered and you became a better thinker because of it. Today, you can switch between focus and digital multitasking. You can have a conversation without checking your phone every 30 seconds, but you can also navigate multiple browser tabs and a Zoom call like it's second nature. You exist in both worlds. That duality is your superpower. Let me give you a real-world example. Think about how you approach learning something. If you want to fix something in your house, you might first try to figure it out yourself the way you would have as a kid, using logic and trial and error. Then when you hit a wall, you pull out your phone and YouTube it. You blend old school resourcefulness with new school access to information. Compare that to someone born in the 90s who immediately reaches for their phone, or someone born in the 60s who might not even think to look online. You have both instincts. That makes you remarkably effective. There's also an intelligence component here. Because you experienced rejection and conflict without the cushion of distance, you developed thicker skin and better interpersonal skills. You asked someone out face to face, risked real-time rejection. You had arguments with friends in person, had to work through them without ghosting or blocking. You learn to read rooms, navigate nuance, and build genuine relationships. Psychologist Dr. Zhang Twenge, who studies differences, notes that face-to-face social interaction during formative years is directly linked to higher empathy, better conflict resolution, and stronger emotional bonds. You have that foundation. Here's what I want you to really sit with. This isn't about being better than generations. It's about recognizing that you carry a psychological toolkit that the world desperately needs right now. You understand nuance, you can hold contradictions. You remember a time before outrage culture and call-out posts. You also understand the value of accountability and change. You're not stuck in nostalgia. You're not naive about progress either. You've seen enough to be skeptical. You've adapted enough to stay hopeful. If you're feeling like the world isn't built for you right now, you're not wrong. You're in this in-between space. Too young to be established guard, too old to be the shiny new generation everyone markets to. That in-between space is exactly where your power lives. You see things others miss. You bridge gaps others can't. You translate between generations, between analog and digital, between ways and new. So, what do you do with this advantage? First, own it. Stop apologizing for not being a native or for not being as cynical as Gen X. You are your own thing, and that thing is valuable. Second, use your adaptability intentionally. The world is changing faster than ever. Your ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn is your greatest asset. Third, mentor. Younger generations need your perspective on resilience, patience, and real human connection. Older generations need your help navigating a world that's left many of them behind. You are the bridge, so be the bridge. Finally, protect your ability to disconnect. Don't lose that part of you that knows how to be alone with your thoughts, to sit in boredom, to have a conversation without a screen. That's not old-fashioned, that's rare. It's powerful. If this resonated with you, if you felt seen, I want you to know you're not alone. There's a community of us born in this strange little window of time, trying to make sense of a world that's moving faster than ever. Subscribe if you want psychology that actually gets you. Drop a comment. Tell me what year you were born and what part of this hit home. If you're curious about how your generation's psychology shapes your relationships, your career, or your mental health, stick around. We're just getting started. You're not lost between generations. You're the glue holding them together. That, my friend, is a rare psychological advantage.